Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Today we are going to study the types of chemical bonds. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to learn the two types of bonds along with their examples, and these bonds are ionic bonds and covalent bonds. As in the previous lesson, we have studied about the bonds that atoms form bonds to become stable. And to become stable, they form bonds by three ways. Either they gain the electrons, or they may lose the electrons, or the third way is that they may share the electrons. By these ways, they become stable. Here is about ionic bond. When an atom loses a complete electron, that electron is gained by another atom. It forms a compound, and such a compound is called ionic compound. The bond between the two atoms is called as ionic bond. So what is an ionic bond? An ionic bond is a bond which is formed between two atoms in which one atom loses the electron and that electron is gained by the other atom. Just recall what they will become after gaining or removing the electrons. Those atoms will not become neutral, will not remain neutral. They will become ions, positive and negative ions. So ionic compounds form cations and anions. Before this compound formation, they were neutral atoms, but one atom loses electron and it becomes cation. On the left hand side, you can see that cations are positive ions. They are formed by the loss of electrons. Example is sodium. It becomes a sodium ion with a positive charge. And on the right hand side, you can see about anions. Anions are the negative ions. They are formed by the gain of electrons and they have negative charge on them. Example is chloride ion. So here is an example of ionic bonding, and an ionic compound will be formed. Sodium and chlorine. As we know that sodium belongs to group 1 and chlorine belongs to group 7. So they will bond together. Now look at the diagram on the left hand side of sodium atom. Sodium has 11 electrons. 2 are in the first shell, which is nearest to the nucleus. Then in the second shell, there are 8 electrons complete. But the outermost shell is having 1 electron. Sodium will become stable by removing or losing this 1 electron. Let's see how it loses. Now chlorine on the right hand side, the red one. Chlorine has 7 electrons. 2 in the first shell, then 8 in the second shell, and remaining 7 electrons in the outermost shell. So chlorine wants to become stable. For that, it needs only 1 electron. In this way, sodium will lose its 1 electron, and that 1 electron will be gained by chlorine. And an ionic compound will be formed. Its name would be sodium chloride. Sodium chloride, ionic compound. Here you can see that sodium is having a positive charge and chloride ion is having a negative charge. This is the ionic compound, sodium chloride, NaCl. The common name is salt. Now another example of ionic compound is magnesium oxide. Magnesium belongs to group 2 and oxygen belongs to group 6. Look at the left hand side magnesium atom. It has 2 electrons in the outermost shell. After this is the oxygen atom which has 6 electrons. So these 2 electrons from magnesium will be lost and they will be gained by oxygen. In this way, magnesium will have a +2 charge and oxygen will have a -2 charge. And this compound, ionic compound of magnesium oxide, will be formed. Next category is covalent bonds. The sharing of electrons between 2 or more atoms. It forms the covalent compounds. Sharing of electrons is called a covalent bond. And the reason is to complete their outermost shell. The atoms which share the electrons through these type of bonding becomes covalent compounds. Example is chlorine. Now, chlorine is a halogen which belongs to group 7. The number of electrons, total number of electrons are 17, and the electrons in the outermost shell are 7, as you can see in the given diagram. Now, chlorine molecule. Two chlorine atoms will share their electron and will become covalent compound. Now you can see in the figure, one chlorine electrons are shown by rounded shapes, and the chlorine atom with electrons whose electrons are shown by cross. Right? Here are two chlorine atoms. The electrons of one chlorine atom are represented by round shape, and the electrons of the other chlorine atom are shown by cross. So here you can see in the last shell, one electron is shared between these. In this way, this chlorine molecule has become stable. Overall, the formula for this will be Cl2, chlorine molecule, and this type of bonding is covalent bonding. Another example, the most famous example, is that of water, H2O. Let's recall the structure of oxygen. Oxygen belongs to group 6 and it has 6 electrons in the outermost shell. Hydrogen has 1 electron. In this way, water is formed through covalent bond. Look at the figure at the top. In this, you can see that there are 6 electrons in the outermost shell of oxygen. And after the sharing, after the covalent bonding, you can see that 2 electrons are being shared between hydrogen and oxygen atoms. In this way, the total 8 electrons you can see. So now water molecule has become stable. In this way, water is formed, which is a stable molecule. Oxygen required 2 electrons, and these 2 electrons are achieved or gained by bonding with 2 hydrogen atoms. Let's wrap up. So today we have studied about the types of bonds, ionic bonds and covalent bonds. Ionic bonds are formed by complete transfer of electrons from one atom to another. Example, sodium chloride, magnesium oxide. Covalent bonding is formed by sharing of electrons between two or more atoms. Example, chlorine molecule and water. Your this week and today's task is to do test yourself question number 2 to 5, which is given in your textbook page 47. Hope you have studied and learned about today's topic, and all the best for your next class.